in 5, 4, 3.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us digitally. I am Tiffany Tarpley here with WKYC, and I have some amazing people here with me. This is a very special edition of Turning Point that we want to talk about. We're going to have a conversation when it comes to sports and social justice and race and diversity and inclusion, all things that we really need to be talking about right now and that are being talked about nationwide. So we want to talk a little bit about this locally, of course. And joining me, my co-host, Dino, DeNatale with WKYC, as well our digital producer, Kevin Clayton with the Cavs. He's the VP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. Peter John-Baptiste, he's the Brown Senior Vice President of Communications, and Jason Lloyd, the editor of The Athletic. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And we're going to dig right into it. This is called a turning point. And we've seen this turning point since the death of George Floyd. What are we seeing right now when it comes to professional sports? The Black Lives Matter written on the hardwood when it comes to the NBA. The attire, right? The clothing that they're wearing, their jerseys as well. Kevin, I'll start with you. Tell us about this moment. What are your thoughts when you see what's happening?
Well, it's interesting when you said tell you about this moment, because that for me and also our team and the league it is a defining moment. What we want to do is to make sure that this is a movement and not just a moment. And what you see on the court, what you see from the fact that today the NBA just announced the fact that we are launching our first ever NBA Foundation partnership with the Players Association, of which over a 10-year period of time, we are committing $300 million to focus on areas of Black empowerment, economic empowerment for the Black community. So we are making sure that from everything, what's on the court, where you see Black Lives Matter, to the names on the jerseys, across the NBA and WNBA, that we absolutely are going to make sure that this is more than a moment. And it just gives support to a community that's under siege and has been under siege for 100 years.
Peter, when we talked, where you talked at the press club, their Zoom event a couple of weeks ago, and one thing I took away from that, you had kind of made it clear that, look, when it comes to issues of social justice, the Cleveland Browns want to be ahead of the game, and they want, you want to be out there in front and not, kind of picking up where everybody else is leaving off. And that's been, I think, a trademark since this organization was founded, and certainly since the Haslams have been here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about the power of sport, really, and the power of sport has to unite people. And I think the Browns organization has always, we always talk about three things really when we talk about the Browns. And I like to lead with giving back, like the importance of giving back to the community and making an impact to the community is something that's an organizational pillar for us. So really getting into the space of social justice and trying to, trying to lend our platform to shine a light on many causes that impact so many of our players and so many members of our organization and really our community at large. It's something that we want to be about as an organization. So we're going to continue to engage and use our platform for good.
Dino, I feel like this is a good time. We talked right before we started this live, and you mentioned that Jason could provide a different kind of insight, especially when it comes to players and maybe those who aren't a part of the public displays.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, you and I have been, on the media side of things for a long time. I don't know if we've witnessed a tipping point like this where it doesn't matter what sport. I mean, you could be talking, the NBA with Kevin, the NFL with Peter, what's going on, obviously, with the Cleveland Indians in Major League Baseball. But, I mean, this has gone on now almost universally here in sports since George Floyd.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys, and Kevin and Peter would probably speak to them a little bit more openly and honestly than maybe the conversations they have with me. But I just feel like guys are finding their voice, and guys that maybe I'm talking athletes who were afraid to speak up before or weren't really sure what to say. They're sort of educating themselves on what to say and how to get their message across. And, I'll start at the top. I'll go back. I know Jimmy Donovan and I did something that for tomorrow and talking specifically about LeBron. But the way that LeBron has been able to sculpt his message and to get his message out, I think other people have sort of followed that lead. And, I think he surrounded himself with the right people, with his publicist who has a political background, who really helped to amplify his voice and really helped to get his message out. And I think a lot of other players are falling in line with that. And I'll even predate George Floyd with that in terms of the foundational work. And Jarvis Landry's one I know that sort of mimicked his foundation after what LeBron was doing in Akron. And guys are starting to realize, I think guys are starting to flex their strength, and they're starting to realize how powerful their voices are and how much influence they have. And they're finally standing up now and using it for good.
And I was going to say, but what is different about this particular moment? Because we can go back to Colin Kaepernick, right? 2016. It was a very different time. I think it was received differently as well than what it is now. Why do you think they feel empowered now to speak up, where maybe back then there weren't as many people joining in that protest, that type of protest?
I think it was a perfect storm of events. Of number one, everyone is shut down by the pandemic, so no one has anywhere to go, and everyone is sort of locked to their television. And number two, we watched a man kneel on a man's neck for 9 minutes, nearly 9 minutes, and kill him on television. We have video of it, and video is very powerful. It's one thing to hear about it. It's one thing to hear the story about it. But when you actually visibly watch a man die by another man's knee, I think that obviously brought out rage and anger in all of us. It doesn't matter your skin color, your race. I think everyone was outraged by it. And again, we had no distractions. We had no sports. We have nowhere to go. We have nothing to do except sit here and watch this. And I just think it was a perfect storm of a lot of different events that all came together and made us say, okay, what is going on here? And the players, I think, really kind of took the baton from there.
So Tiffany, I'd like to add to what Jason said. And Jason, I think you're correct. The fact that when you see the life being taken out of a man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, yep, that leaves a mark on you. But I just got to tell you, you can go back to February 23rd, when Ahmaud Arbery was shot down in the street like game animal. Breonna Taylor coming home from working a shift as a healthcare worker in her bed sleep, and 22 bullets bring into her bedroom, 8 of which hit her. George Floyd on the 25th, and then kind of Rashard Brooks on the 12th of June. So I think what it is for me, and I was part of protests that were down in Cleveland. I was protesting out in Avon, where I live. What I saw was a different level of humanity coming together, where before the movements have really been African Americans kind of out talking about their own situation. I saw all of society. You saw a global response to this of, wait a minute, enough is enough. So for me personally, after seeing movements over a period of time, what's different for me is the fact that it's not just about the Black population. You have almost every walk of life and every walk of population saying, enough is enough. We want to come together because this isn't right.
Question for both Kevin and for Peter. Both of your franchises have been out in the forefront in terms of hiring high-level executives, African-American, head coaches, African-American. I mean, your credentials speak for themselves, but that's not the way it's gone for a lot of professional sports franchises, and the way that I always think about, because of my affection for John Wooten and the Rooney Rule and what he had tried to do and what obviously is policy now in the NFL. Are we getting better in professional sports, maybe in college sports, but just speaking to the two of you of professional sports, are we getting better at looking and finding the right people to be hiring and to bring in? When I say the right people, it's these African Americans who deserve it, who have not gotten the chance. Are we doing better at this now?
It's hard to say, really, Dave. I mean, you look at different leagues. If you look at the NBA's track record of hiring black coaches, it's probably a lot better than the NFL. I think what's happening now is there's a much more of a microscope and a focus on it, and I think that's a really good thing. I think sometimes people get a little bit caught up in focusing on the fact that the numbers aren't there. And I often think like a better dialogue is for people to understand like what diversity really does for an organization, how it makes an organization better, how it brings in different perspectives and different thought processes. It's really about like diversity of thought. If you're trying to find the best answer for anything that you're trying to solve within it could be within an NFL franchise, or it could be within a Fortune 500 company. Diversity of thought allows you to have the dialogue you need to get you to the best answers. And sometimes I wish people would focus on that. And I think that's what we've done at the Browns. You look at our football side, you got young people, we got the youngest GM in the league. He's gonna look at things from a different mindset than, maybe someone who's been an old school football person. Well, you want to mold all those different philosophies and perspectives to get together to come up with a dialogue and come up to an answer on how you can best solve a problem. And diversity just helps so much in trying to do that.
And, Dave, from our perspective, I'm going to offer you maybe a slightly different angle. I've been with the Cavs now about 18 months, and I came from a major healthcare system down in Cincinnati. And when I was telling them, hey, I'm going to go work for the Cavs and here's what I'm going to be doing, I remember a conversation I had with a young man, and he was a white male, and he said, the NBA diversity, and he laughed. He's like, oh, Kevin, that's going to be an easy job. What he was saying was, when you look at who's on the court, who's on the field, you see people of color. And from the NBA's perspective, as Peter John has said, we have coaches, we have GMs that are African American. However, when you begin to look behind the scenes and begin to peel the onion back, it's really, are we now populating the business side of sports with people of color? And the answer is yes, we absolutely are doing that. But I would also take it to another level, that it's not just the diversity. We can go hire people. There's plenty of people to hire. It's now around, are we looking at the systems that are maybe barriers from keeping people from getting promoted? Are we looking at salary inequities? Are we looking at promotion opportunities? Are we looking at those kind of systemic issues that people then leave? Because any sports franchise can find people of color to work as coaches, as administrators, but do you create the right kind of culture that allows that talent to actually grow and contribute to the organization?
If I can jump in real quick, these two organizations that we have right now, the Cavs and the Browns, and I talked briefly to Peter about this a couple months back. Cleveland is one of only two cities to have multiple Black executives in authoritative positions. It's Cleveland and Miami. Miami with the Marlins and Chris Greer with the Dolphins, and then Cleveland with Kobe Altman and the Cavs and Andrew Berry and the Browns. That's it. So that's how far we have to go with this. That's how much progress we have to make. And when you say, is it getting better? No, really, it's not. In the NBA seems to be so far ahead of everyone else. But I spoke to Dr. Richard Lapchick, who does the Gender and Diversity Report Card, a couple, 2, 3, 4 weeks back. And he was praising Cleveland as being on the forefront when we're talking about this stuff. I'll go all the way back to Wayne Embry as the GM of the Cavs back in the 80s. And you look at the Black head coaches the Cavs have had, from Mike Brown to John Lucas to Byron Scott to Ty Lue, and the Browns really, I would applaud the diversity that they've had in their front office, from Sashi Brown, Andrew Berry now, Hugh Jackson as head coach. So these are two franchises that are way out in front of a lot of other teams and a lot of other pro sports. The Cavs and the Browns specifically, I think, have done a remarkable job and have really led on this where a lot of other teams have not.
And I think that's awesome and that's great. When we talk about sports as a whole too, especially after what happened with George Floyd. And Peter, I almost wonder if this is a great question for you. I think we've seen companies come out We've seen the statements. We've, in response to what's going on and this commitment to diversity in different organizations. My concern, I think, is this just good PR? And you talked about a movement, not a moment, but is this good PR? How do we make sure that this does continue to be a movement and not just a moment, not just words, and not just around for maybe the first few months, of the season? Peter John, I mean, Peter John-Baptiste, how do we make sure that this continues?
Well,
This isn't just a PR stunt.
Yeah, you said it. It's not about PR. I mean, I think we've all had, important dialogue within our organizations, and it comes down to what's right and what's wrong. And, that's what you really need to focus on. So the dialogue and the conversations we've had about like our history as an organization and what we've done, we've talked about ramping it up more and doing more. And, I think about our ownership and the Haslams and what they do. They believe in education. They think equity in education and a quality education for every individual in this country can be a great equalizer and can help bring people up. That's something we've always focused on. It's going to continue to be a focus of ours. So it's not about like good PR. I think honestly, it's about like doing the right thing and understanding the platform and the power you have as a professional sports team to use it in a good way. And we're all committed to doing that. I know the Cavs are, I know the Indians are, I know the Browns are.
You mentioned platform. It brings up kind of the I think a logical next step. You talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I know Kevin has talked about it. Andrew's talked about it. The Cleveland Browns really want to encourage the players to use their platforms and be out in front for social justice.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've always talked about, and I can tell you, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are on the same page. They've talked about social justice with our players quite frequently throughout the offseason, and we've already had open dialogue throughout training camp. It's it's not something, and Kevin has said this, it's not something that can be discussed and done within a meeting. Like, this has to be a common theme really all season long. We want our players to be able to use their platform. We want to help them use their platform. We want to give them that spotlight to really create some change and make an impact. And we're committed to doing that.
Can you talk a little bit about the work that you all are doing within the community? And especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, how are you reaching out to fans and just people who live here in Cleveland? What are you doing in that sense?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier about our commitment to education and what we've done. We have a program that's a partnership really with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, where we've really tried to fight chronic absenteeism and try to keep students engaged in school. So that's something that's going to be a constant dialogue and something you're going to hear from our team, our players, and our entire organization constantly. The Browns Foundation is really dedicated to eliminating barriers to people getting a good education. So if that's partnering with a group like Shoes and Clothes for Kids to make sure that kids actually have school clothes to be able to go to school, or if that's partnering with a group like Proving Ground from Harvard on really digging in to determine what are the barriers that are keeping students from school. Those are the type of things that we're focused on and we're committed to doing.
And Kevin?
Yep. So thank you. So several things, and what I'm really proud of about our organization is that after George Floyd, for us, we just made a pivot for what we already were doing, what was already in place. And over the course of the year, we just like the Browns, we have a great relationship with the Cleveland Public Schools District from a law enforcement standpoint. We have spent time with law enforcement, with the mayor, with the actual county and the county executive, and spending time understanding how we can be of more help. As you know, in our community, in Cleveland and in the county, racism has been identified as a public health crisis. We're spending time with both the county and the city to understand how we can leverage our brand and the work that we do to help the community to kind of wrap their arms around this. We've spent time with the NAACP and the Urban League, and really right out of the box, right after the George Floyd murder, we partnered with the NAACP to kick off a series called A Time to Talk, so that we could leverage our relationship with the community to talk about issues around social justice, social injustice. We're actually right now beginning to have conversations, well, we had some conversations where we're hoping to have our building as a voting location, voting precinct downtown. Hasn't been actually approved yet, but we're in the process of doing that so that we can make our building part of the downtown fabric to help from a policy change by getting people to come out to vote. Absolutely 100% nonpartisan, but the more people to vote, the better I think our society will be. So a number of different things in which we're doing, not only in the African American community, but the Latinx community and others, of trying to be what I call a Trojan horse, where we come into the organization, we come into the community based on kind of our brand, we can bring other communities with us. That's kind of what we're trying to do to be a good partner in the community.
Peter, I know we got to let you go here in like 2 minutes, so I wanted to just bring up one big point with you before we let you get out of here. When we get back to playing NFL football, and like everybody else, you can't wait. It's going to be a big topic in the NFL. It'll be a big topic around the Browns, and of course, that'll be the national anthem and players kneeling. And I thought Kevin Stefanski set the tone for it well before even, after the draft, when he said, hey, look, I'm going to have discussions with all the players and I'm going to listen. And is that still kind of the mentality around Berea right now, is listening to everybody before we get out on the field and actually that becomes an issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what really this is all about. Like, we want to be able to understand different perspectives. We want to be able to have an open mind about how people are impacted from different things. So yeah, those discussions are happening and they're going to continue to happen. It's rough to me sometimes that everyone just wants to like point to the anthem and make that the focus of what this is. And we all know it's not about the anthem. It's really about the work and what we're trying to do to make our country a better place, what we're trying to do to make sure everyone's committed to equal rights and justice for all. I mean, we hear those words and those terms thrown around all the time. And I think a lot of times we get distracted from what the real issue is. And that's about all of us as Americans coming together and understanding that we can make a better country for all citizens. And I think that's the focus of our players. I think that's the focus of all of our leagues. And that's what we need. That's what sports has always been about. It's always been about unifying people. And we want to be a part of that. We know the Cavs want to be a part of that. The Indians want to be a part of that. That's what we're going to be as an organization always.
Peter John-Baptiste, thank you so much for your time. And I know you got to run. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks for being with us tonight.
No problem. I appreciate you guys having me and have some good dialogue.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
Jason, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Indians name change and get your idea. What kind of things are you hearing from fans when it comes to this idea of the name being changed?
Divided. It's a hot topic. It's absolutely a hot button issue. There's a lot of people who feel like, okay, it's time to retire it. It's time to move on. And there's just an equal amount of people who want to keep it and don't agree with it and don't agree with the change. I never thought it would happen. I wrote, maybe it was just my naivety to the whole thing. It's been around for so long. I never thought that it would go. It's pretty obvious at this point it's going to go. You don't come this far down the path just to say, you know what, we reviewed it and we're good. We're going to keep it. So it's quite obvious at this point now that it's going. And there's it's split among fans, and maybe it's part of this whole of I don't know if awakening is the right word or the movement that we're going through. That's just next on the list, I guess. And I know the Indians at times have been sort of careful on what they've spoken out about as an organization because of that name, because they feel like they're going to catch a lot of blowback from it because of that. So they've been sort of hesitant at times to do certain things. And so I think that there's a lot of people within the organization who feel like it's time to move on from it. And so that's pretty obvious at this point. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know if it'll be a year from now, 2 years from now, if it'll be in time for next season, but it's pretty evident by now that there will be a new name on Cleveland's baseball team.
Kevin, if you were advising any franchise, I'm going to talk about the Indians, but if you're part of a franchise that's thinking about making this radical change of a name change, what's your approach if you're in that front office as to how you would want to start and evaluate making this kind of a change?
So I'll use the Cleveland baseball team as an example. One of the things that I would do is to go back to the Native American community and involve them in the name change as well. And just you involve them because they've been the community that's been kind of oppressed through that. I'd also involve the fans, and I would definitely involve even the players to have everybody have a voice. But ultimately, it's Cleveland's team, the community. So I think the fans should have a voice in what the name change would be. I would absolutely make sure that it is not connected to any culture whatsoever that could possibly be offensive. And that way, setting up those parameters. But the purpose of even going back to the Native American community is to pay homage to them and to pay respect to them, to let them have a voice in what the future is.
And so, in speaking about the future, I think we have a couple of minutes, and we're going to be wrapping it up here shortly. But I want to give both of you the opportunity to kind of, just present some of your final thoughts on where we are as a country and where you think we're headed. I mean, considering the steps that have been taken, especially when it comes to sports, social justice, and issues like that.
I think we're making progress. Absolutely, we're making progress. As I said earlier, it takes a long time to turn a barge. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn a barge in open waters. So it's gonna take time. But I absolutely believe we're headed in the right direction. I've applauded some of the things that I've seen over the last however many months, 4 or 5 months. And I agree with what's been stated previously. We have to make sure that it's not just a moment. We have to keep the conversation going like this, moments like this half hour special, and keep the conversation and keep talking and keep momentum moving in the right direction.
And for me, it's identifying what we're actually facing. What we're facing is systemic racism, and therefore in our community, it exists. Within organizations, it exists. So focusing on how do we eradicate racism is really the common denominator that's going to make ultimate change, where we can sustain this as a movement, not necessarily a movement. It's not looking at law enforcement and saying, hey, if we fix that, everything's going to be fine. If we fix that, that's law enforcement. That's not going to deal with education. It's not going to deal with healthcare, employment, and economic empowerment.
Thank you so much. Kevin Clayton with the Cavs and Jason Lloyd with the Athletic, and Dino, thank you so much as well.
You got it, my friend.
Have a good night, gentlemen. We appreciate
Thanks,
it. We'll
Tiffany.
keep the
Thanks,
conversation going, and hopefully there's action, right, along with that conversation. That's what's most important.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.